I like a T-shirt with a reference on it that people don't understand.
Okay.
It's
Immediately?
It's my favorite thing in the world. I love them. I love T-shirts. I bought Carly a shirt because she loves classic, like really classic literature, especially Dante's Inferno, which
it's one of her favorites.
Yeah, I if not her favorite, it's in that upper echelon. So I bought her a T-shirt for Christmas that was the map of Inferno, like the layers of Inferno, because it's like
it's metal.
Well, yeah, but if you know what it is, then you know what it is. The best example I can give you of a shirt that I love because there's a reference on it that is both mildly insulting or like nauseating to certain people if you don't know what it is. But then if you do know what it is, it's like, wait, you know what that is? And then it's like, well, not really. It's a really niche example. I went to the Salvation Army for it's a really good place to buy furniture on a budget. And Carly and I were looking for a dresser.
Okay. We
found that dresser, which is good news because currently it is holding the shirt that I'm talking about. The shirt that I found at the Salvation Army it's like a ball and chain, but the chain isn't a chain. It looks like an umbilical cord connected to a hand. And it's just that. And it's black and white. And so it's a ball connected by what looks to be a cord, like a biological cord to a hand. And underneath it, it just says cursed birth.
Do you have any idea what it is?
So I looked it up. I looked it up, by the way, today for this episode because I really wanted to mention this to you. I looked it up today. It is a, quote, new, like NU, new metal, like a new metal band from Gainesville, Florida.
Interesting.
So somebody has to have like, because that's local enough that it's like either they opened or were at a show and somebody was like, man, these guys, or a member of them ended up in and around our home because that Salvation Army is close to where we live. And we do not live we are hours from Gainesville. So I love wearing it. Because stuffy old people, I'll wear it.
Are just immediately offended.
Yeah, because cursed birth sounds, there's a lot of implication that could have. That inspires some hateful looks.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
See, I like shirts of products from movies that don't actually exist in real life.
Give me your best example.
The best example that I have of that is a shirt that I own from a commercial within a horror film that you hate and I love called Mandy.
I absolutely
And the commercial is for cheddar goblin mac and cheese. And not only do I have a shirt of the cheddar goblin vomiting mac and cheese onto a child for this ad.
Right.
I also own 3 boxes of cheddar goblin mac and cheese that was produced by a company online.
And I have the giant weird Klingon sword axe thing that Nick Cage forges to attack his hippie would-be wife murderers. I have a 1/1 scale replica of that.
I wish you would kill me with that.
Hello, all you dead-eyed deadites, and welcome to the Third Channel Podcast.
That's topical.
Thank you.
Where we delve into the horror franchises you love from the perspectives of a lifelong horror fan.
And a newbie to the genre. I'm PJ.
And I'm Derek.
And today the only thing we're here to talk about, like every week, is horror. Today's horror comes in the variety of the cheddar goblin. No, it's never, ever, ever the cheddar goblin. It comes in the variety of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead.
The Evil Dead, to be specific.
Correct. 1981.
The original is called The Evil Dead. The Evil Dead.
And if you really want to get technical, it's The Evil Dead.
No.
Okay.
But what's funny, and we'll get to this, I'll mention it again, I'm sure, during our Army of Darkness episode.
Okay.
But the original title that they wanted to use for that is Medieval Dead.
Oh, that would have been better.
Yeah.
That would have been better.
Great.
Army of Darkness is like a...
It's bizarre. We'll get into it.
Yeah. But not in this episode.
No, not in this episode. Now, the reason I want to stress that it's The Evil Dead is that it's remake or reboot or whatever you want to call it is just called Evil Dead. So it sets it apart from that. Mm-hmm. But it also allows us, because if you make an acronym out of The Evil Dead, TED, it's TED, which means at the end of this, we can thank people for coming to our TED Talk.
We can thank people for coming to our TED Talk about a movie made by Ted Raimi's brother, Sam Raimi.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Again, these are the kinds of observations that you can only find here at the Third Channel podcast. I'm your host, PJ.
And I'm Derek.
And today, the only thing we have to talk about is face acting and how much fake sweat you can spray bottle onto Bruce Campbell before he turns into a potted plant.
I wonder how much of that is fake.
Well, so where did they film this movie?
This was shot in, it was in a remote cabin in Morristown, Tennessee.
Depending on the location of Morristown, Tennessee, and when they filmed it, I mean, it could have been pretty hot. Bruce Campbell had a very thick head of hair, a jaw that was about the size of a Doc Marten boot. So I don't know. It might have been real, but it looks at certain times it is preposterous.
Yeah, no, they're very wet in some of those scenes. And honestly, after listening to the commentary, I'd say probably they would have to spray them down for some of it, because I remember them talking about how it was very cold at times shooting at night. And so there's actually a couple shots in the movie where you can see the actor's breath inside the cabin.
Gotcha. Really quick, some housekeeping, some podcast housekeeping before we launch into this discussion. Thank you, obviously, for those of you who keep tuning back in. Your feedback and reviews and stuff have been great. Tell a friend. Tell a friend that likes horror stuff. We're just trying, now that we've kind of gotten the groove set up and, the snowball has been handcrafted, we're trying to get it to just roll down that hill, gain a little momentum. Any help and any support goes a long way. And then also with beginning to talk about Evil Dead, or excuse me, The Evil Dead. This is the second franchise that we're going to discuss. And that's basically, what the channel's about. That's what the Third Channel's all about, is tackling these franchises one after the other, and just kind of sharing what we think about them and engaging with you guys. So definitely feel free, we have all the socials as a podcast. Feel free to hit us up, tell us what you think. Feel free to comment on the stuff that we post. Let us know.
Yeah, we're posting all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe too much.
Derek's fingers ache from the amount of smartphone tip tapping he's doing to post. And it goes noticed.
Yeah, I'm getting that texting thumb or whatever.
Oh, you know what? Ty is... our producer Ty has absolutely established the most amazing board filled to the brim with these sound effects, and I having my dirty little mitts near the soundboard. Derek, thank you so much for posting on social media so often. That's enough of that.
You're far too kind.
Oh, me or the canned applause?
The canned applause.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the housekeeping basically out of the way. This is the second franchise, so you can expect us to go through all the Evil Dead films.
Yeah, this one might be a little more wordy off the top of like trying to set the stage of what this franchise is, and especially because the making of this one was just insane. And with that, we'll go into The Evil Dead, released October 15th of 1981. For its initial, like the first time it was ever screened. That was at the Redford Theater, which was in Detroit, I believe. And then it actually got a theatrical release in the US like 2 years later, April 15th of 1983. Because that is a whole long story that I can hopefully take us briefly through in a bit. But it is directed by Sam Raimi. It is his directorial, feature-length directorial debut. He had made, some short films before that, a lot of Super 8 films. He and Bruce Campbell, who is the main actor who plays Ash in the film, they were like high school friends. So they made movies that way. And Sam was, more comfortable being behind the camera, and Bruce was then, as they put it, he's the one that the girls wanted to look at. So they put him in front of the camera. It's also written by Sam Raimi.
It's funny because I think most people of our age group find The Evil Dead and find Sam Raimi's name attached to it in reverse order from Spider-Man. They come from that trilogy.
Yeah, if you're not if you're not a horror kid.
Well, our generation specifically. I mean, those movies were coming out when we were, preteens.
Yeah.
So, 3 is like, by the time 3 is happening, we're either entering or exiting like high school. But like that first movie came out, I think it was like
2002.
Yeah. I was very young. So then you grow up and then you watch this one and you get it because the camera work is just so stylistic.
Yeah, Sam Raimi has such a specific shooting style that you cannot mistake his work for anyone else's.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't matter what genre he's working in, because he's done, obviously, horror films. He's done superhero films, a couple different franchises in that. He's done a Western. He's done true crime. Or crime, noir. He did a baseball movie. Like,
looking at his superhero movies as well, you scan through Multiverse of Madness, and it takes, it takes that like 10-second click forward that most streaming devices have now. It takes 2 clicks, and you're like, oh, there it is. There's that angle. There's that fucking car.
Yeah. It's produced by Robert G. Tappert, who is another friend of theirs, and the cinematography was done by Tim Philo. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Budget on this one, if we thought it was low for Black Christmas, this one was allegedly $375,000.
Jesus.
Was the budget.
I would guess $375.
Now, I know the initial money that they got for it was like $90,000 to begin work. And then I think once it kind of like got to the production company for distribution, and I also think having to blow it up from, I believe it was shot on 16 millimeter film, blowing it up to then what it would need to be to have an actual film print to go to theaters. I think that cost a lot of extra money. But that's the number that I found.
90. I mean, no disrespect. I love this movie, but $90,000 seems like, well, what the fuck did that go towards? It went towards that excellent blown up bridge.
Yeah. Thankfully, even with all that money spent, the box office, what they ended up finally making for this whole thing is $2.6 million.
Jesus Christ!
So like just the amount of money versus what they spent to what they made is incredible.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts.
That's basically that's the gist of like just getting those numbers out there. You've been doing summaries. Do we want to jump in so that people, if you haven't seen the movie, or maybe you're just needing a refresher on what it is, what does IMDb have to say about this one?
It says something that I find to be both illuminating and accurate.
Okay.
Which these have been hit or miss.
Hit or miss?
5 friends travel to a cabin in the woods where they unknowingly release flesh-possessing demons. Perfect.
Yeah, that's really good.
Black Christmases was also quite good. That's what we want, IMDb editors. What we want for a summary is either the first tap of that paragraph on the back of the case, or if you're writing your own, that's perfect. Follow that rubric. Don't say the Scream 4 one, which is...
Well, okay, and I think the issue, or the thing that we're finding, is that the 2 movies that we have the best examples for, Black Christmas and The Evil Dead, they're very simple in what their story is.
Well, yeah.
And so it's easy to summarize.
because saying Ghostface comes back and is like, he visits them. It's like, whose birthday is it?
Yeah.
He came from out of town.
So Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, they basically had the idea to make a short film that's called Within the Woods, and it was shot on Super 8 camera. It is super low budget. I this week found a copy of it because it's never been officially released. Even on, I cannot stress the amount of times that The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and The Army of Darkness have all been re-released on VHS and DVD and Blu-ray over and over and over. Collector edition after collector's edition. It is insane the amount of money they've tried to milk from this thing. And I just keep buying them. So
that couple million dollar figure, that's just you.
Yeah.
Over a lifetime of buying Blu-rays.
But as far as I'm aware, Within the Woods has never been officially released on any of those. And I don't know. I think Sam was working on trying to clean up a version of it that he could put on one of the special editions back whenever it first went to DVD, and then scrap that at the last minute. But they made this short. It runs about 30 minutes. And this last week I actually found it's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. It is awful, awful quality, like visual quality, but it is so much of things that you see in The Evil Dead is already there in Within the Woods. It's a 30-minute short. It cost them $1,600 to make. And then what they did is they took that and used it as like a proof of concept. And they would kind of like show it to people, anyone that they could, until finally like that secured them enough money. Raimi had gone to like a friend's lawyer and asked him, how do you get a movie produced? And the lawyer was like, well, I'm a lawyer, and so I don't know how to do that. But this is what I can tell you, how to raise money and how to do, get it out there to people. And so they ended up making enough, like gathering enough funds, the $90,000 to begin work on it. And then whenever they started working on it, they originally had it titled as Book of the Dead, inspired by Sam Raimi's like interest in the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Because H.P. Lovecraft has a story, if I'm not mistaken, called Necronomicon. Mm-hmm. And so that is the Book of the Dead.
Necronomicon, also not commenting on the quality of the convention itself, but is the best name for a horror convention of all time.
Oh, absolutely.
Necronomicon.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
It's a great pun, but it's
serviceable. It explains itself. Great name. I don't know if the con is good. I know that the year that I went, it was fine, but I also went a decade ago, so I can't speak to how it is now.
Yeah, hopefully it's doing well. I've heard good things. I've just never made it there, which is strange. I've never done a horror convention at this point. Maybe that'll be...
We'll get a booth.
Yeah. For what? So yes, Morristown, Tennessee, they rent this remote cabin. The filming process was extremely uncomfortable for the cast and crew, probably is putting it lightly, because it sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. During pre-production, there were 13 crew members. They stayed in the cabin whenever they were, not shooting. That means that most of them, because there are only a couple rooms in that cabin, as we see pretty much the whole thing throughout the movie, most of them are having to sleep in the same room. There was no plumbing in the cabin, so that means that several of the actors went days without showering. And then because of the freezing conditions, most of them caught colds or different illnesses during the filming. It's a lot of the movie is them running around in the dark in the middle or in the woods in the middle of the night. So they all have injuries throughout this movie.
Not being able to shower, especially looking at some of the cast and how much makeup they wear, has to be just miserable.
Yeah. Bruce Campbell tells a story of like, basically, anytime that they needed to, like, the end of the day of shooting, he would have to climb in the back of a truck because he couldn't get in a car of any kind because he was just caked in blood and mud and awfulness. And they would drive him wherever they could to shower him off, I guess.
Jeez.
And at one point, he tells the story, they had these heaters that they were using inside the cabin. And on the commentary, Bruce is like, honestly, we probably weren't supposed to be using those inside. Somehow we didn't die of carbon monoxide poisoning, but...
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I thought about the cabin catching on fucking fire.
Also that.
Because like it's 2024 and on the boxes of space heaters, they're like, don't leave these on if you're not looking at it. If you can't smell it being on fire, don't leave it on.
And yeah, they're using them inside. He apparently had taken his shirt off, his bloodied shirt from one of the nights, and he was drying it on the thing. And whenever he picked it up off of it, it was just a solid sheet.
That is so funny.
Because it had just like baked it, basically.
Yeah.
Campbell later described the filming process as nearly, and I quote, 12 weeks of mirthless exercise in agony. But he did admit that they managed to have some fun while they were making this movie. Which
is one step above, and eventually we'll get there, one step above the shooting that Tobe Hooper has mentioned about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because that's what that reminds me of.
That is what I was thinking of the whole time that they're describing these things.
Because at least this is friends and like they find a way to have fun. But like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all of these veritable strangers are like puking on each other. And it's just like, ugh.
We will, can't wait to cover all that.
Yeah.
It had its, like I said, had its world premiere at the Redford Theater in Detroit. And they screened it there because it was a theater that Campbell loved. He often visited there as a child. And so in some of my reading earlier today, actually, I found this interesting, kind of tie to something we talked about before, which is Raimi had opted to have the most theatrical premiere possible, including custom tickets, and he ordered ambulances outside the theater to build atmosphere. And so he was kind of trying to do what William Castle was doing, 30 years prior with like gimmicks and stuff at the theater.
Ambulances make zero sense.
It was something that William Castle did where he would have like nurses on standby for one of his films just in case you were feeling faint.
Okay.
And so I guess Raimi was just trying to emulate that. But it absolutely they expected nobody to show up for this thing.
Yeah.
Amazing crowd. They loved it. He starts touring the movie around. It attracts the attention of Irvin Shapiro. He screened it at the 1982, I always screw this up. It's either Cannes or it's Cannes Film Festival.
Oh, the Cannes Film Festival?
It's not that. I know it's not that.
But if we know it isn't that, then we can, listen, if you always get it wrong and we know it isn't Cannes, if we say Cannes as a joke, if people are like, well, that's wrong, we're like, yeah, it's just a third channel bit.
Okay. So I like that.
The Cannes Film Festival.
Ty, cut this so nobody knows.
No, don't cut this. Don't cut this. I'll be mad if you, I'll quit. It's the Cannes Film Festival. That's a bit. We're going to have shirts that say third channel podcast at the Cannes Film Festival.
I love it. Irvin Shapiro, he was someone who he was like the first to handle a bunch of other directors' works who later became famous. Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, George A. Romero. He's the one that actually got like Night of the Living Dead out there.
Okay.
So he already had success there. He also was one of the founders of the Cannes Film Festival. So that's what got it in there. And then Stephen King, I believe, saw that screening and he gave it a rave review. And then Fangoria magazine started covering the film in late 1982, writing a bunch of articles about how long the production history was and all the nightmare that it was. And so it was like, drawing up all of this attention for this movie that like only the people who had gone to either that Redford screening or the festival had seen. And eventually New Line Cinema acquired the distribution rights and the wide theatrical release was then held on April 15th of 1983. New Line Cinema, as you may know, if we haven't mentioned it before,
is the house that motherfucking Freddy built.
Absolutely. And then one of the most like groundbreaking things for this movie, there's kind of two of them. It's Raimi's like his shooting style, which basically is them just inventing their own ways of doing Steadicam without having a Steadicam. That system exists in the world at this point, but it's very expensive and they don't have any money. So when we get to so whenever like the opening of the movie, whenever you see, what do we want to call it? The evil force, like it's just kind of the camera moving through the trees and stuff.
Yeah, in my notes in my last rewatch of this movie, I called it the speed demon.
Okay,
because it moves real quick and it's like a demonic presence. But yeah, it's like evil. It is the evil part of the Evil Dead,
right? And so what they would do with that is they would actually just like it's what they called shaky cam, and they would mount the camera to like a piece of wood, and they would have 2 camera operators hold it and just run through the woods.
See, I always figured it was sped up footage.
Some of it probably is like ramped a bit, but that is how they do it.
It's also harder to speed up footage when it's film than it is digitally.
I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, we need to get if you are listening to us now and are a person who works with film, specifically 16 millimeter film, and you want to guest on our show to kind of educate us and our audience about how easy it is to speed up footage on 16 millimeter film compared to digital. You also have to know about digital film editing. Feel free to send us an email. To the email address that we say at the end of our episode, which means that you have to listen to the whole thing. Trapped you. Gotcha.
Wow. He got him. The other groundbreaking thing here is the special effects makeup, which was done by Tom Sullivan, who he actually did the effects with them for Within the Woods, and so he came on for this one as well. But he is basically known for his work in the Evil Dead trilogy and The Fly 2, so the sequel to the Jeff Goldblum Fly film.
One of my favorite examples. I think the best example of a body horror something.
But Tom Sullivan he helped design the Necronomicon that we see in the movie, and he actually was the one who did the illustrations and the symbols seen in the book.
Listen to this. This is the tape I found downstairs.
It has been a number of years since I began excavating the ruins of Kandar with a group of my colleagues. Now my wife and I have retreated to a small cabin in the solitude of these mountains. Here I continued my research undisturbed by the myriad distractions of modern civilization and far from the groves of academe. I believe I have made a significant find in the Kandarian ruins, a volume of ancient Sumerian burial practices and funerary incantations. It is entitled Naturan de Manto, roughly translated, Book of the Dead. The book is bound in human flesh and inked in human blood. It deals with demons, demon resurrection, and those forces which roam the forest and dark bowers of man's domain. The first few pages warn that these enduring creatures may lie dormant, but are never truly dead. They may be recalled to active life through the incantations presented in this book. It is through recitation of these passages that the demons are given license to possess the living.
Hey, what'd you do that for? It's just getting good.
I just don't want to hear it anymore, that's all.
Of course, these demons in this series are deadites.
Yeah, I was trying to find anywhere. I don't believe they use that term in this movie. Yeah. And
I love that term, though.
Yes, it is. It sets it apart as something, they're not just zombies. They're not just demons.
It's like an evil that I mean, you can't survive the possession. Well, I mean, they do, but realistically, and that's something we'll talk about, is that the rules of this fucking franchise are
loose.
Yeah.
At best.
They basically don't exist.
Yeah, they're more like guidelines.
No, not even Mr. Gibbs. No, that's Barbosa.
Yeah.
See, this is why we don't go over pirate movies. We're specifically not the Third Channel podcast is specifically not about pirates.
Yeah, that's the subtitle of the podcast.
Yeah. PJ and Derek from the Third Channel podcast hosting Away Me Anchor, the podcast, where we talk about pirate movies. Not Pirates of the Caribbean specific, just pirate movies. Like Pirates of Penzance is one of them, I think.
Yeah,
I've never seen that. I don't know if it's about pirates.
So our movie begins with our group of 5 college kids. Mm-hmm. I think they're from Michigan State, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. 2 couples and then
And
It's the two S names, Scott and his girlfriend.
Shelley.
Yes. And then Ashley, played by Bruce Campbell, who is fantastic. And also funny, watching The Evil Dead with you for the first time, I went, oh my God, it's the Usher from Spider-Man 2. Because that's where I knew him from.
Yeah. What's funny is like Bruce Campbell, because he is a longtime friend of Sam Raimi, he's in these movies where he gets like his real start at acting. But then he's in most of Sam Raimi's, whether it's a big role or a blink and you miss it cameo. I mean, even so far, he's in all 3 Spider-Man movies. But then he also plays like the Pizza Papa in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
We have a friend who's listening to the show, and you told me this story, and I fucking love this story.
It's hilarious.
He texts you, and he's like, what are you guys going to talk about after Scream? And we explain, well, we're going to do The Evil Dead. And he's like, oh, are those the movies with the guy from Burn Notice? And that's tremendous, because you said that to me, and immediately I was like, oh, fuck, that's right. Bruce Campbell is in Burn Notice.
Yeah, I did a lot of seasons of that.
Yeah.
But yes, it's the 2 couples. Ash is with Linda, and then
His
Ash's sister
Cheryl.
We've already mentioned the car, but they're driving specifically in Sam Raimi's 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88.
It is this horrific, a comedian, and I can't remember who, a comedian has this bit, and it's no one ever buys a tan car. You don't buy it. You're given it. Or you find it. Or no one sets out at the dealer and they're like, hey, I want this car, but I want it in tan. And Sam Raimi has had to go out of his way to buy that tan car 50 times.
Yeah, I know the initial one was actually his. I believe it was his father's.
See?
And then... but it's Ash's car. It plays Ash's car in all these movies.
Right.
It also is Uncle Ben and Aunt May's car in the Spider-Man trilogy.
It is the car that Doctor Strange slices in half with magic.
Nope.
The one that flies up in the trailer, and he cuts it in half with magic.
He cuts the bus in half with magic. He cuts the car. The car is in Multiverse of Madness, but it's in the universe at the end with the bad Doctor Strange, where the convergences happen and all the cars are like floating. It floats down the street at them.
To be fair, the last time I saw this movie, I was in the hospital, so I remember it as somebody would remember watching a movie in the hospital.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's a car flying through the air, but you knew that it was in there.
I knew it. I could feel it.
You could feel it in your bones. It also is Mrs. Ganush's car in Drag Me to Hell.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is another Sam Raimi movie because that's when he made his return to horror after doing some Spider-Man movies. I just love that, like, from the jump of this movie, you have these couples in this car driving this country road in the mountains of Tennessee, and like unexplained at all, the camera cuts back and forth from like the lockdown shots of them in the car to then just this like camera just whipping through the woods, and it's like, what the hell is this? And we've already explained it, but it's like you come to find out that it is the evil force. There's
like a presence stalking these beautiful college teens.
And they keep cutting back and forth, and they cut to the hood of this big rig that's coming the other way, and Scotty is driving, and he's asking, well, where are we, Ash? And Ash is like, oh, and it's like this weird kind of like comedic game that's being played. And then I guess the evil force pulls the wheel of the car at the last second and almost gets them killed by this big rig.
It's a lot of people complain about the Star Wars series in general as lazy writing because it's the Force. And people say that, like diehard fans all the way to people that write for the series. Well, the Force works in mysterious ways. The Emperor waved his hand and made a thing happen to somebody light years away, because why the fuck not? And it's a strange, lazy choice. In this one, it doesn't feel as lazy, but I think it's funny because we're describing it as the evil force.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah,
That's
the evil
that's-
force used the evil force to move the car steering wheel.
And they almost die. And then they don't.
Good.
And they make it to a bridge with a sign that's like, dangerous bridge, travel at own risk. And they, slowly take their way across this bridge, which is falling apart. And it's one of those horror tropes that we always play with. We will see more and more of these as we go on for these sorts of for lack of a better term, cabin in the wood movies.
Yeah.
Where it's like you get these things that happen to your people before they get there. And it's kind of like, okay, maybe this is a bad sign. Maybe we should go home. Maybe we should turn back.
Right.
And they just keep pressing through. And they make it across the bridge. They make it to this little cabin in the middle of the woods. And it's already, there's an odd feeling about the whole thing.
Yeah, like they walk up to it and like the swing starts going. And it's just bizarre. She at one point sketches the clock and the clock stops.
Yes. So they get there, the swing on the front porch is like slammed against the wall for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And then stops for no reason once Scotty grabs the keys.
Yeah.
And he goes inside and we get this cool kind of like 180, 360 degree shot or whatever of the entire cabin. And it's like, get used to seeing these four walls.
You see this? This is where you're going to be for the next hour and a half.
Yep. It's like you see everything that's going to come into play, the windows, the mirror. The deer above the mantle doesn't really come into play until Evil Dead 2.
Right. In what is, we'll get to this.
The greatest scene.
It is such a good scene.
The fireplace, the bookcases that Ash is going to fight later.
Because like really it is only in this film, it is only the cabin and the woods.
Yeah.
And driving up, we get plenty of shot of the woods. Mm-hmm. So you really, at this point, your geography has been, set up. You're good to go. This is established now.
And that's what everything is so simple. It's basically the one location, these 5 people, and we're just gonna, it just moves. The pacing in this movie is just like, we're here and we are just gonna fly through this thing. Yeah. Just like the camera flies through these set
Just like
pieces.
the evil force.
Right. But yes, no. You already brought up Cheryl drawing the clock. Mm-hmm. And so it's like she is drawing the clock. It stops. Mm-hmm. I don't know who did those drawings. An amazing drawing.
Yeah. It's probably the dude that worked in the book. The special effects
it does
guy.
kind of look like his. Yeah, you're right.
Kind of like enough detail, like really, really advanced, like comic book art is how I would describe, like, especially a lot of the illustrations within the evil, like the Necronomicon. I would describe that as like really, really high quality comic art.
Yeah. And it gets better in Evil Dead 2, but yeah, I can see that. And then all of a sudden her hand just begins scratching horribly across, like turns the page, rips the page off of her drawing. And then it's just like quickly, just like frantically scratching around this page. And it kind of creates a rough illustration of, we wouldn't know this on a first watch, but of the Necronomicon, of a book with a face on it.
Yeah. You know what's funny about the scratching drawing is it does, because it's the Book of the Dead. We wouldn't know that. But it's also that pencil. Mm-hmm. That pencil's a big deal.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that pencil does come back into play.
In a big way.
In a painful way. What I was struck with on this, like these rewatches, was that they haven't found the book themselves. Mm-hmm. They haven't listened to the tape recordings. Mm-mm. They haven't read from the book themselves. Mm-mm. But the forces are, like, the evil is already happening. But her hand is already being possessed. Yeah, it's in ways that there's the trope of older horror movies. You just scream at the TV. What the fuck are you doing? It's like, bitch, your hand just drew something on its own. You don't find that noteworthy? You shouldn't share that with your friends? She tells none of them. They have dinner. Uh-huh. And then the cellar door kicks open on its own. Right. And... Which, again, if it were a regular door,
maybe. There's a draft. It's an old cabin. But the heavy fucking door that doubles as the floor of the cabin is just like, hello, darling. And it just kicks open.
And then, like, whenever they're looking at it, it's got this chain that's, like, looped around it in ways. And, like, it's clearly like, oh, well, someone has had to trap something down there at some point in time. But let's not think or discuss that at all.
Right. Or even, like, because, you know, especially in Tennessee or, like, rural southern areas, a lot of those cellars and a lot of things like that are used for South crime. Things like, I don't know how else to explain. That's the perfect thing to describe moonshining. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever it is, it's probably not above board. Above boards. That's good. That's a good joke.
Yeah, that's an on the way homer right there.
On the way to the cabiner.
They cellar is open.
Where, and I wrote this in my notes, and I know you did too.
Okay.
So let's say it at the same time.
Are we just saying, like, so Scotty and Ash have gone down there?
Right. And we see something.
Yes, we do.
And it's the reference.
Yes.
The Hills Have Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a torn poster of The Hills Have Eyes on the wall where they find the Necronomicon, they find the shotgun, the shells, the tape recorder, all that good stuff.
The seeing, and I never remember his face, but the man who is like famous for playing the mutant in The Hills Have Eyes, the dude with like the kind of, this is going to be like rude, but he kind of has an eggy head.
Michael Berryman is his name. Yes.
Because I saw his face before I saw the words. Which is funny
And
because
it's just like this top little corner of the thing, but you know it. Like if you know that poster, you know it.
And I don't know if New Line Cinema distributed Hills Have Eyes.
I don't know either.
They might have, just because they obviously at some point have a relationship, a working relationship with Wes Craven, because their studio is now known as the house that Freddie built.
Right.
So at some point, but it's funny because that's the first note I took. In fact, the thing that inspired me to take notes on this movie, because usually I don't. Usually I try to just be a bit more candid. But this one's such an easy movie to take notes for because it's so simple and it's not very long. And that's the best kind of homework to do. And so I'm like, the first note is Hills Have Eyes poster in the cellar, in parentheses. Derek and I should say that at the same time.
Okay. Thank you for showing everyone how the taffy is made, but that's revealed to me right now.
Oh, fun as well. Fun story about me. I ate a piece of saltwater taffy recently, and it was crunchy, and I thought that was strange.
Interesting.
And it's because
were there like nuts in it or something?
No, it was about a quarter of my back molar had broken off into the taffy.
Well, that's just awful.
We're talking about horror stuff. Chewing your own tooth is pretty horrific.
It's the worst thing I could think of.
Yeah.
The reason that torn poster's in there is it's a nod to Wes Craven, who then repays that in A Nightmare on Elm Street because he has Nancy at one point watching The Evil Dead in her bedroom.
And then in next week's episode, we may have something else to say about that.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's kind of the Jay and Silent Bob in Scream 3, Wes Craven in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, like the handshake between directors.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that.
It's always fun.
So down there, we've set up everything that we need to. They have found the Book of the Dead. They start playing the recorded reel-to-reel tape.
As we listened to a few moments ago.
And then worse and worse things begin happening because immediately, like, the fog machines get turned on in the movie.
Right. One of the coolest effects of that movie is towards, every time that it's like revealed that whatever has happened is being undone, and they just reverse the footage of those fog machines. It's such a simple effect, but it pays dividends because it really does look like the earth is almost reabsorbing whatever that evil is. It's great. I love it.
They really hammer it with the camera movement because they'll have the camera like chasing later in just like basically the next segment is the camera's chasing Cheryl back up to the house. And she's like, trying to get the key and trying inside. And then whenever she makes it inside safely, then the camera like, and like pulls back away from the house in the same sort of way of like, we almost got you. And so now we're going to retreat back to the woods.
Yeah.
the unfortunate thing is that our next sequence is
Cheryl leaving the cabin.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and say it now because this movie plays with themes that we haven't had to tackle on this podcast yet. So I will give the podcast's first trigger warning for sexual assault and rape. So skip ahead, quite a bit. I'd say at least play it safe 10 minutes.
Yeah. So they've now played these tapes of the doctor reading from the Book of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And the evil force, we see the camera like kind of looming outside the windows, and you see each of the like couples kind of, because there's a scene that's also really quickly. That's also where we get the introduction of Ash giving the like magnifying glass necklace to Linda, and they do this little like game where he's closed his eyes and then she looks at him and then she looks away and he opens his eyes. That will play back. That will come back later. And
really quickly, and I know that this isn't important to the plot of the movie, but that is really where you're like, damn, Bruce Campbell, you have one eyebrow. Like,
because it's the most extreme close up on his eyes
and well lit. Because like earlier in the car, you're about as close, but it's dark. You're in the car, but that is like. It is like taking that magnifying glass necklace and looking at one eyebrow. It is like, and I get it. It's early 80s. It's whatever. It was a different time for eyebrows. But my God. And once you see it, it's the rest of the movie.
Yeah, thanks for ruining it for everyone.
Yeah, sorry, everybody.
They introduced that necklace. It will come back plenty of times. And it's also where the love theme, like the score, plays for the first time. Then the evil is lurking outside the windows. We see kind of all the couples, and we see Cheryl by herself in the bedroom.
Fifth wheel, yeah.
And outside of the window, there is a disembodied voice that says, join us.
Yeah.
I think it might be the second time because it may have also said it whenever she was doing the drawing. Could be wrong. But then she goes outside to investigate.
Because she's scared, which makes sense. Yeah. Because people shout at this like, I think we kind of lampoon this in Scream 2 where it's like the cameraman's like, man, fuck this, I'm out of here. And he leaves. But like, I do think that there is a natural urge when you're not certain, but you're suspecting something is wrong.
Something is odd. Something is off here.
So you go to look, especially because you're surrounded by friends and like, the tapes have freaked her out as well. But it's like, Scotty's like kind of poking fun at it and not. So there is that like calming atmosphere. So it's like, well, no, fuck it. I'm going to go take a look.
Yeah.
Which is the worst decision anyone makes in this movie.
Yes.
There's no easy way to say this.
No.
It leads to her getting kind of like she gets raped by a tree.
Unfortunately, it's the easiest way to say it.
And like they have done similar stuff as this franchise moves forward. But normally it gets worse as franchises go along. They pull this theme way back.
Yeah. This is where it's the worst, I think, of the whole bunch. The basically like the vines ensnare her. They rip her clothes off, like her robe. Now I will say they achieve a lot of those effects because it seems like to be actual like vines and sticks and things like that. And they use a lot of like reverse photography, kind of like with the fog, to achieve some of those things. But it is a harrowing scene. It reminds me a lot of, and I don't know if you've seen this movie or not yet, but it reminds me of the rape scene in Rosemary's Baby,
which I have not seen yet.
It has a similar kind of foggy, dreamlike quality to it, where it's like this can't possibly be happening.
And like the performance is good for considering what is happening.
Yes.
And like what she has to play on.
Yeah. The performances of everyone in this film are insane in the best possible ways. Yeah. And we'll go more into that as we go along.
Where like Bruce Campbell's performance is insane in a funny sort of like charming way. And it's like, that's what we come to love with these movies is like Ash is a fucking wild child. It's like, this is a crazy performance and like, you are in the middle of the woods and the direction is like, well, yeah, you're being sexually assaulted by vines. So go for it.
Yeah. Act against that.
Yeah. And it's like, professional as you can be, that had to have been hard to sell. And I think it was sold well,
Yes.
which is both a good and bad thing because it's hard to watch. It's bizarre.
She finally gets loose, runs back to the cabin. We see kind of from the evil force camera, like trees, like small trees are just being like pushed down.
Yeah.
Along
Which leads
behind
to
her.
And that's the first time that it's like monstrous. And I think it's got something to do with the book, the tapes having obviously disturbed even, what has been undisturbed as they enter the cabin. It's not like really engaging, and now it really seems to be because like that's scary. It's a bizarre, even dated as it is visually, it's still bizarre to see the trees just knocking down from a camera movement is scary.
And I don't know how they achieved that effect. I'm sure
guess miniatures.
either that or maybe they had a saw and they cut off some of the and they just kind of needed.
You think
to
they
push
actually
them.
push trees
I
down?
think they pushed some small trees down. To me, that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like a miniature to me, but I could be wrong.
Well, it also, because they use stop motion, and I don't know that the stop motion would have been done like on set with props that big.
Yeah, all that stop motion that happens at the end, that was pickups later on. That was done in like somebody's basement.
So like maybe it could be either way. We'll find out. If you know, leave a comment.
Yeah, please help us out.
Sam Raimi, leave a comment.
That would be amazing.
That would dude, I'd be so happy.
She makes it back. This scene is almost shot for shot from Within the Woods. Her running back to the cabin, stumbling, trying to get the key in the door, and the camera getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And then she drops the keys, she bends down, and then the hand comes out and grabs her. And it's Scotty or it's Ash, whoever, from inside, and they pull her inside, and then the camera pulls back away from the house, defeated for a moment. She's freaking out, clearly, obviously, and she's like, we need to leave right now. And so
Nobody goes along with it. The two S names, Scotty and
Shelley.
Shelley, thank you, are both like, no.
Yeah.
We're on vacation. She's like, Ash, you need to take me the fuck home now. You need to drive me the fuck out of here, which leads to my favorite set piece of the movie. And, I made the joke that it was a matte painting, but then on my rewatch, I think the background may be, but I think the foreground is a built prop. Because what it reminds me of is a very, very long time ago at the Magic Kingdom at Disney World, there was a ride for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
And there was the sequence where the evil witch is basically thrown to her death or falls to her death.
Right.
And they used set pieces that were both the wall of the background was painted, but then the boulder, like the mountainside, was a real physical, tangible thing. And it played off that foreground background.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I was very young. I have very distant memories of that. But nostalgia is nostalgia, and seeing it, that's what that reminds me of. And so on my rewatch, it was just like, oh shit. Maybe the background is matte, maybe not, but that foreground.
I think it's, and that's the wonderful thing about this movie is I think it's a blending of a bunch of different effects. So I think it's matte painting, I think it could be miniature, and I think it's partially a set.
Yeah, because that whatever it is, whatever that culminates in, it looks otherworldly.
Yes,
it's the first time where we leave reality behind, because it's like, a bridge wouldn't just do that. It's like the metal is like bent and twisted.
Yeah, it looks curled up almost like a fist, almost like a hand.
It looks Nightmare Before Christmassy,
Absolutely.
like Tim Burton-esque, which the two of them remind me of each other often. Sam Raimi and Tim Burton.
Yeah.
The way that, first of all, they have like this sort of, just their physical appearance. They have like this sort of sunken, hollow eyeball, under eye.
Yeah, they're very
darkness.
tired men.
Yeah, tired men. But they creatively, they seem like the kind of black sheep of their respective circles because of what they create and their oddity. And the set, the bridge is just, it's a turning point for the narrative of the story. Because now it's like, well, I think there is a line of dialogue like, well, what the fuck would have done that? Like, there's no.
Well, and it's Shelley says it a couple times, just like, they're not going to let us leave.
Right.
It's not going to let us leave.
Yeah.
Which is such a horrifying thought of like, you're on vacation.
I know I'm hopping ahead a little bit, but Scott also is
Yes.
like, they're not letting us leave. Now that we've done the trigger warning really quickly, you said this to me, and I also have a note. Scott comes back in, so there is a chance that 2 people got raped by trees. It's possible. I don't know. They don't state it objectively, but he comes back and he's like, the trees are not going to let us leave. And it's like, well, did they tell you? Or did they do something horrific to you?
Yeah, that comes a little bit later after Scotty tries to leave. Before that, so they can't leave. The bridge is out. Ash and Cheryl come back to the house.
And Ash is like, well, we're at least stuck here until morning.
Yeah. And so he begins listening to more of the tape, just, I guess, to get a better understanding maybe of like what has happened here. Because clearly someone has had other things happen in this house before. And the quote that I have from that is the archaeologist is saying that his wife is now a host to a Kandarian demon, and the only way to kill it is dismemberment. So it kind of gives us a bit of the rules of like, these things are really hard to kill. You basically gotta cut them up.
Yeah. Because if you don't, they just keep coming back.
And that's when Linda and Shelley are then playing the card game, where Linda is trying to guess the cards that Shelley is holding.
And Shelley is pretending like she's getting them right.
It's a bit like the scene in Ghostbusters.
Right. With Bill Murray.
Yeah. And that's
one of my favorite lines that Ash gives is the, oh my God, Ash, I'm getting them right. I don't know how I'm doing this. And he's just like, yeah. Like, he is so distracted. He's just like, okay.
It's like, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I'm listening to these horrible, horrible things that have happened to this couple.
Well, watching this movie the first time through, it is so quick, the switch flip here.
Yes.
Because then Cheryl is like, card. And it's like, the fuck is happening?
It's so creepy.
And she's like kind of looking out the window. And then she turns around. And now this is where I'm going to be divisive.
Okay.
I hate the makeup design in this movie.
Yeah?
Hate it.
All of it?
All of it.
Because they all look different.
And I don't like any of them.
Okay.
I hate all of it. It is chunky and ugly. But like, I'm fine with ugly makeup. I'm fine with ugly visual effects. I'm fine with that. This is like, it is like caked on, but doesn't look real. It looks like makeup. It looks like play pretend. And then like, even when it's like Linda, because like Linda's not rotten. Linda's not like, she doesn't look like
she looks
corpse.
like a doll.
Right. Well, she looks like an ugly clown doll. And it's like, what the fuck is this? And I do like the whiteout eyes, like the rule that like their eyes milk over. And like, because that's like the telltale is even when the Deadites kind of, because they do it a couple times in the first and second Evil Dead movie where the Deadite will like pretend like kind of chameleon back to a human and is like, no, everything's fine. I'm fine. But it's like the second the eyes go white again, it's you son of a bitch. But yeah, no, this is probably the least egregious example is Cheryl here in this moment where she's kind of floating. And she says the line, one by one, we will take you. And that kind of sets the precedent of what the rest of the movie is.
Yeah.
But and it's fine. It's not, this one's not too egregious, but like, obviously she becomes possessed. Eventually they grab her and they lock her in the cellar. And then every other time you see her, it's like her hand, it looks like a chalky covered like glove that like a plumber has, and it's like covered in old refuse from years, just layers of it, because it's just layer after layer after layer of makeup. But the problem is that doesn't look, it looks like layers of makeup.
Yeah.
So
now, let me remind you again, the budget for this film.
Right. I hear you. But my brother and I, a long time ago, cosplayed the Joker and Two-Face, and we built up the Two-Face prosthetic that we made with liquid latex and toilet paper to make it lumpy. That liquid latex bottle cost us $20. The toilet paper we had at the house. But if you have to factor in the cost of a roll of toilet paper, call it $1, especially at the time. and it looked great. You take some fucking, blush and some eyeshadow, and you put some under the eyeball, and then you spirit gum it to the face. Spirit gum is probably another $20. So $50 made a Two-Face prosthetic that lasted for I think 2-3 years. So where I understand that the budget is super low, my brother has amazed me time and time again with special effects makeup, because he's very, very, very talented, and he does it with I'm not saying that Calvin has no money, but he manages to pull this stuff off without spending, typically with just the stuff that he has in a makeup box. So it's got to be a style choice.
I'm sure it probably is.
And I just don't like it.
And I also think it's this movie I think of as such a step-by-step how to make a movie. You can truly see, you see the strings, you see them doing it themselves and coming up with it day in and day out.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a lot of that, of them just not knowing how to do things and making it up as they go and just trying things.
Yeah. And if that is the style choice, I don't have to like it. I still love the movie. It doesn't change the way I like the movie. The movie's great. The movie is great in spite of it.
Yeah.
It is the thing I don't like about the movie, but people love it.
Yeah.
It is definitive.
I love it. I love the look of it. But I do see your point. Yeah. Especially, we'll get into, there's a whole reason why some of them look worse than others. And I'll get to that probably toward the end. The only thing I will say is, because you said you like the eyes, the whiteout eyes. Those are, I think it's called sclera.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lenses. It's a lens, a contact lens that goes around almost your entire eye.
Yes. And these are glass lenses at the time. I don't know if they make
you can't wear them for very long.
No. So that was going to be my point. It's it took 10 minutes roughly to put them in the eyes in the first place. The eye doctor, whenever they bought these things, was basically you can only use them for 15 minutes at a time max.
Yeah.
And you can only do that in and out of 5 times a day.
Yeah.
And that's under the best practices.
Yeah.
These are people in a cabin in the woods covered in filth
and makeup and not showering. Right.
Take these things out, put them back in multiple times a day.
Now it's not the same. It's not the 15 minutes. It doesn't take that long. They are regular contact lenses, but you still can't wear them for more than a couple hours.
Right.
Because they suffocate your eyes.
Yeah, they don't allow your eyes to breathe. But what that meant, and this was interesting to me, they said it on the commentary, is that because of that, you can't really see out of them. So that means before they put them in and they shot the scene, they would have to block the scene with the actors with their eyes closed so that they could learn the kind of muscle memory of moving around the set and acting with the other actors.
That's amazing.
Blind.
Yeah, that's amazing. Which is an example of the chameleon thing. Ash, why do you have me down here? And it's you don't do that. You know what you are. You know what you did.
Yeah, they play a lot with that at different times with both Linda and with Cheryl. Anytime that Cheryl's the door of the cellar is closed and they've locked her down there, they've chained up the door because now they figured out, oh, well, this is what this is for. And sometimes her voice is back to normal and it's that, okay, is it not?
Right. Because again, we don't know. We don't know the rules. Do these monsters come in and out? Do they stay forever?
Cheryl was just floating moments ago.
Right.
I don't believe we see anyone else float any other time in the movie.
No.
So yeah, that was a one and done, I guess.
Yeah. What powers do these ghosts give their hosts?
In the later movies, they can jump very far and things like that. We don't see a lot of that in this movie, though.
No.
It's more of just
pencil stabbing.
Which, yeah, before they throw her, the way that her head whips around and then snaps that pencil up into the air and then into Linda's ankle.
Yeah. Which, by the way, fucking gross.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to have happen to you. But also, that stop motion, another thing that reminded me of Tim Burton. It reminded me very much of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Early movies that would use stop motion in different ways. I don't think there is a comparable scene specifically in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but it's just that very...
Large Marge is the only that I can really think of with the stop motion.
And the dinosaur. But
yeah.
it is just that early 80s stop motion and like those lines that crinkle away.
That's what I love though, is like whenever you see it kind of take over Linda's ankle from the stab, it's stop motion, but it's like they've drawn on her skin. And so she just had to lay there still, I assume, and then, draw another little line.
It looks good.
It looks great. And it's,
looks better than it looks better than the original Terminator endoskeleton.
Yeah, I guess.
Because that's every time I think of tough stop motion, and I love that movie, but that is some tough stop motion. Everybody's freaked out because, their friend was just a fucking demon who floated around. She's like, fuck this. And Shelley goes into her room and she closes the door. And then the fucking camera smashes through her goddamn window.
Yeah. The evil is lurking again.
So it's like, why the fuck didn't it do that the whole time?
Yeah.
Again,
it could
rules out the window.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know if it's growing in power as the movie goes on.
It slinks away from the door because Cheryl runs up to the door and they let her in. It's like, oh man. And it like kind of slings away because like, I didn't get to get this lady and I wanted to possess this lady. But then it sees the window and it's like, man, fuck this. So is it like, glass is fine, but wooden doors? I don't know. But so then she's also possessed.
Right. Scotty goes to look for her and gets attacked.
Yeah.
And then they end up just having to hack her to death with the axe. In the middle of all that, she gets Shelley shoves Ash up against the bookcase in the corner and it falls, it collapses on him. And then we watch Ash fight with this bookcase for like 5 minutes straight as he's nearly killed. But they do this cool, and this was all within the woods as well. Like Scotty, they have the Kandarian dagger that they found downstairs and she's trying to stab him with it. And he ends up like whipping out a pocket knife and he like almost cuts her hand off, and then she bites through the rest of her wrist and bites her own hand off.
Right.
And then he takes her hand holding the dagger and then stabs her in the back.
Yes.
Which seems to kill her.
Yeah.
Or at least have a better effect.
Right.
She's spewing what looks like milk and blood out of her mouth. Reminds me a bit of the androids from the Alien franchise.
Yes.
And then he has to hack her to death, or hack her up with the axe. And I love it because whenever they show the body parts on the floor, they're all like still kind of twitching.
Yeah. Like wriggling. Yeah.
And they're like, and Ash is just like, because if you know anything about this series and where it ends up, it's like Ash is the hero.
Right.
But it is a character arc that we watch happen in this movie. Because he's like squeamish and afraid and like can't bring himself to like hit her or do anything.
Yeah.
And Scotty's like, we have to kill her, to use the axe.
Which is fucking crazy because in the context of the movie, all of these people are witnessing every movie franchise that starts with something that's horrific and like otherworldly. They get their feet wet in that first movie. But before that, they have traditionally before that, they have no idea.
Right.
And so, like, the Reagan in The Exorcist has no idea that demons exist or her mother before she's possessed. So they have no idea. And Ash is squeamish and doesn't want to commit physical violence. Scotty, on the other hand, he kills his girlfriend pretty fast.
Yeah, that is true.
So, like, what the fuck's up with him? Especially because then immediately after, and now he and Cheryl mirror each other because Cheryl gets uncomfortable and she goes to explore and then is like, obviously something terrible happens to her and she's like, get me the fuck out of here. And then he chops up his fucking girlfriend.
They bury her.
And then he's like, fuck you, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not staying here anymore. Fuck this. I'm out.
Like, I'll find a way through the woods. I'll figure it out.
And then
you deal with your possessed girlfriend.
Yeah.
I just had to deal with mine.
Assumedly, the same thing that happened to Cheryl happens to him. As he returns, and he's got this. It's like a branch.
Yeah.
That's like impaled him.
Yeah. And so he is like
collapses
on the couch and dies, I guess.
Or like gets as close to it as you can.
Right.
Like he is mortally wounded. He's barely hanging on.
Linda, turns back and forth and tries to trick Ash, and he ends up dragging her outside and leaving her there. And then she just he's closed the door and locked it, I think, at that point, but she just pops back into the house eventually and attacks him again. There's no real explanation there.
And her makeup in this scene is famous. Mm-hmm. It's she's like baby doll face, and it is probably my least favorite. My least favorite factor of the movie is kind of the special effects of the Deadites, like their appearance. This is nothing like typical. It's not rotten in any way. It's just like creepy.
Yeah.
And it is creepy, but I don't know what it is.
Is it like the sing-songy voice, you think, with it?
No, the baby doll shit, like the baby doll performance. And I guess in talking to you, I guess that makes sense because they want the face's creepiness to match like the performance. So they kind of like baby doll it up. But like, I don't know. It's actually, I will give credit to the discussion here where I get it a little bit better. I think I just hadn't put that together, but I do appreciate that more now.
Yeah. That is another, again, I think the performances in this for this cheap little movie that they made with their friends in the woods is it is insane how much they are giving whenever they are in the full makeup. They can't see because they have those contacts in. They are throwing themselves at each other against the walls of this cabin, on the ground outside. He's dragging her around and she never breaks. There's never they I don't know, they take it super seriously. And they just never break their character of whatever their possession, has kind of made them seem like.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this movie, and I noted this today while I was watching it, is that at a certain point, it becomes what Evil Dead 2 is in its entirety, which is Ash cannot catch a fucking break.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once it starts, he's fucked the whole time. Linda is possessed, and another trigger warning here for exactly the same reason as earlier. So if you skipped ahead, you're going to want to skip ahead again. But Linda is trying, Linda possessed is trying to she's on him and pinned him. And it very much seems like that's what she's doing to him. And so again, something about the men in this movie, he wasn't willing to hurt Shelley, but he just fucking stabs the shit out of Linda and seemingly kills her.
Yeah.
And then he's like, ugh, and he turns around and he goes back inside, and then Cheryl's not in the fucking cellar anymore. And he's like, son of a bitch.
Because while he was out there, digging a hole to bury Linda and then beheading her and all of that, beating her with a railroad tie or whatever.
I love this fucking movie.
You see, it keeps cutting back to Cheryl. I mean, just slamming that cellar door, and slowly you see the
bolts
for the chains just come up a little at a time, and then he comes in and it's the door is open. Where is she?
Because from his perspective, he finishes doing the hardest thing he's ever had to do in his life, which is removing the head of his beloved, burying her in the earth in a cabin that he presumably rented. He goes back inside, and the possessed corpse of his sister is now loose. And he's and he has one eyebrow. He is covered in sweat, and now he has to find this bitch and cut her goddamn head off. It's just it is the moment where I feel the worst for him, because that's the lowest of the low.
Yeah. No, this is probably my favorite part of this movie. It's my favorite shot for sure, is the next thing. He goes in and Cheryl is missing. And so he's like, I have to go lock the door. And it's where the camera starts really just Dutch angles and swooping in on his face really tight. And so he runs to the front door and he's fighting it closed. He gets it closed and locked. And I think Cheryl at that point is approaching from the outside, and we keep cutting and cutting and cutting back and forth, and she's getting closer and closer, and he's having the hardest time to close this door for no apparent reason. And he finally gets the front door closed.
It's another rules question. Enhanced strength, so they can fly they have enhanced strength. I'm trying to assemble a list of their powers to see if next week it holds up.
Yeah, if there's any rules that carry over. I mean, they can transform back and forth between their regular form and their possessed form.
Yeah,
as trickery and verbal trickery.
So like they can kind of shapeshift to a degree.
After he beheads after he beheads Linda outside, her head is still like talking.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, even that didn't technically kill you.
Well, and like Shelley's body wiggles. So like they're limbically, their limbs are
still alive somehow.
Can function independently. Which is like John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah. That's
Well, I guess they would have enhanced strength because Cheryl fucking rips the bolts of the chain up out of the ground.
I don't know if that's the actress actually like in that makeup whenever she's down there like slamming that thing. Ellen Sandweiss, or I believe that's how you pronounce it.
That's Randy Macho Man Savage. Which explains why he's Bonesaw in the first Spider-Man movie. Sam worked with him.
That's a good pull.
As Cheryl in this film.
And I say that because she doesn't always, like, sometimes you look at it and it's like, oh no, that's that actress in makeup. And then other times it's like, that doesn't look like her at all.
And the question is that because they use stunt performers, or is it because the makeup is 4.5 inches thick?
Right. And I think it's a little of both.
Yeah, probably.
And it brings me to another point because there's this credit in the end credits that's odd. It's this one page and it's like fake shimps, and there's a list of all these names.
Okay.
Sam Raimi is a big fan of the Three Stooges.
Oh, okay.
Which that will become incredibly apparent as we move into Evil Dead 2 and The Army of Darkness.
Well, it's also apparent with, I don't want to, because I want, it's an important part of the discussion here immediately after this. So, okay. For those of you who don't do this at home, because I notice a lot of people do this. We started doing this probably, almost a decade ago. We pin things. We're talking to each other and he'll say something that makes me think of something. This is a bit of housekeeping because I'm sure we'll pin stuff in the future.
Yeah.
If we haven't already. But I'm going to say here, pin, because I have something to bring up about the Three Stooges as we move into the discussion.
So pin Three Stooges.
Yes.
Cool. So it's an idea that came from the Three Stooges where I guess they would have stand-ins for certain of them. Shemp is, I don't know much about the Three Stooges.
I don't either.
But they would have stand-ins to play the different demons. And so Shemp is like a character from the Three Stooges. And so he would use that as the term of like, oh, you're a fake Shemp. And so sometimes that's why they don't look the same.
Okay.
And a lot of that, especially as we move forward throughout the movie, is toward the end, it's just Ash running around.
Yeah.
And that's because
that's almost,
during production, the rest of the actors, once they kind of finished their stuff, they went home and then they were like, oh, well, we still have stuff to shoot. Okay, you put on some makeup and now you're Scotty Demon.
That doesn't bother me though, because it's like it dehumanizes those characters and turns them from characters that we know with names and personalities into enemies. And in a movie like this where your zombies talk and have like, because the Deadites, something that sets them apart is that the Deadites have like a glee about them.
Yes.
There's like a personality there. They enjoy the madness. They enjoy the murder, the
chaos
insanity.
of it all.
Yeah. They love it. It's the evil loves it. And even like at the end of the franchise with Evil Dead Rise, it still plays with those themes.
Yeah.
And I like that. I really like that about this franchise. My pin, Three Stooges. Because she's banging on the door. He locks the door. I said earlier that Scotty seems to be dead, but is like barely hanging on. But sometime in between him, like, on the couch and now, he's obviously died because Ash gets the door locked. And then Scotty's body starts attacking.
Yeah, and it's this amazing shot where he like pops up from out of frame, like below frame. Also, they do the exact same thing in Within the Woods. There is so much from that little short that they just...
And so will you, listener. You should also watch it.
it's a decent little 30 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
It looks awful.
If you don't feel well, 30 minutes is about the trip to the bathroom that you're doing right now. So if you are ill, within the woods while on the toilet. My pin is
Yes.
he, there's always the bit where Mo, which I believe is the ringleader of the Three Stooges, would box their ear and flick them on the head and then poke them in the eye. And Ash gouges Scotty's goddamned eyes out in the most disgusting special effects shot. And it's disgusting and beautiful.
Yeah.
That's where the special effects really kicks ass. Is that and the gunshot when he shoots the body of his sister point blank in the face. But those effects are great. Great.
Yeah. All of that is the ending effects are something else entirely.
Well, and the stop motion stuff is pretty good as well. Like for stop motion, it's a little grainy, little Rankin Bass and frames per second or whatever. I'm not a stickler for that. It doesn't, as long as it looks cool, it doesn't need to look believable or great. It just needs to look cool. It needs to have its own style. And obviously this is super stylistic, but even before that, it's the eye gouge. It oh my God. And when he pulls the piece of branch out of his, it's like his stomach. It's like his, where your intestines would be. And he pulls it out and it just
gushes.
It's so gross. And it's awesome because there's no seam with that. None.
Right.
And that's great.
It's...
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Sam Raimi, no notes on those two effects. They're great. Keep it up. You're going to go far. Maybe you'll make Spider-Man.
Maybe.
Maybe you'll make Spider-Man 3. And if I could go back in time, I'd tell you, just skip to the one where with Jim Carrey was going to be Carnage.
We don't have time. Okay. Eventually, so Ash is run back and forth. He's locked the two doors. That is probably my favorite shot in the whole movie.
Yeah.
We started talking about that and then we got sidetracked. That's fine.
Yeah, we pushed ahead a little too far, but we can go back this time.
So he's locked the front door, he's locked the back door, and he's like, the shotgun, where are the shells? The cellar. I have to go back down there. And that's when, Sam Raimi just decides in these movies, how best can I cover Bruce Campbell in just blood and
sweat and dirt.
Yeah. Because he goes down there and literally the pipes are leaking blood.
Yep.
And the big pipe under the house just bursts and dumps gallons of blood on Ash.
To which, of course, he's mouth open screaming. That's 40% of this movie, and 70% of 2 is just the It's just fucking Bruce Campbell screaming his goddamn lungs out.
Yeah, and it's just the camera just whipping around to just close-ups of his face.
Close-ups of his face, Dutch angle wide shots of the geography, back and forth. Back. It's almost like shot reverse shot, but the conversation is Bruce Campbell screaming at the set.
Yeah. One of my other favorite shots is after he's got the shotgun, he goes back into the front room and the camera is on the floor and his boots are kind of standing on the camera. You can see both of them and you're seeing up between the boots looking up at him with the shotgun. And he spins. And when he does, his boots go across the camera and it in that blackout moment for a frame, it cuts to something wiping across and you see the front door. It's horrible to try to explain. It's very difficult to try to explain that in an audio format,
but it's amazing.
It's an insane. It's not a simple shot. It is just this one quick thing that most people see and don't even think about, and I love it so much.
Well, and wipes and transitions are an easy thing to do well. They're really easy to do well because nobody's paying attention to that. Nobody's paying attention to how the geography of the camera goes from one to the other. Nobody's paying attention to that. Nobody's paying attention to how it goes from one of 3 angles of a triangle to get the center in frame. No one's paying attention to that.
And
but
it is doing that I obsess over.
But doing it creatively.
Right.
And then doing it well at the same time are what makes Sam Raimi movies good.
Absolutely.
Because it is those little things that you would never pay attention to. Is this being shot? It's the Doc Ock sequence in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
The transitions of those of because it's a very similar camera movement of, the evil force is the camera, but the tentacles become the camera as well. So the camera's just chasing nurses and doctors around the surgical room. First of all, that's the best scene in that whole trilogy.
It is a perfect horror short film in the middle of your Spider-Man movie.
And it goes without saying that you can see him figure out how to do all that stuff right now in these scenes. But even Spider-Man, even those movies have incredible scene transitions. And it is, and this is really where you fall in love with his vision for this stuff, because it's the, her getting into the door and closing and the camera pulls away. It's earlier, I mentioned the fog going back into the trees. Those are simple effects, but they're done at angles where they feel supernatural. It feels that way, which makes you buy into it. So it doesn't matter if the special effects makeup looks a little shitty. It doesn't matter if the cabin looks worn down and not like a place that anybody would rent in a million fucking years. It doesn't matter that the bridge looks fake. You buy into it because it looks otherworldly and the story is one of an otherworldly force.
Absolutely.
And it's just tremendous. Anyway, sorry to go on that huge diatribe, but yes, that is an amazing scene wipe.
That I love. These rewatches, I sat just in awe of all of that because I'm racking my brain of, did they storyboard this? How did he see this in his head to direct it?
Right. Well, and it's the reason why he is able to, I think it's the reason why he's able to have a career, because cheap fucking horror movies and cabins are probably being made at this point by the dozen a year, and of people trying to, it's open mic night. It's everybody wants to be a comic. So you go to open mic night going, well, I can do that. And then no one ever notices you because you don't stand out because everyone's doing the same thing. He stands out because who the fuck would have thought to do a from the floor up boot wipe into a spin to a locked door? Because it's not a scene transition.
No.
It's literally just a camera movement. But it goes from an angle no one uses to the most boring shot. It's a closed door. Yep. And it's just, it makes it interesting.
And then he follows that up with another shot that I love is from above. So Ash is walking from basically the front door over to the sidewall where the mirror is. And the camera is above him. And they actually, apparently the cabin that they were renting, they had to leave in as good a quality as they got it.
Right.
And I think that they had removed like the drop ceiling of that. And so they had just left the
slats.
Yeah. And of the ceiling itself, that they had to replace it afterwards. But whatever.
That's where the budget is.
So that's as the camera is then following him across the floor from above, looking down on the top of his head, as they pass each one of those like boards that would hold up the ceiling, there's a little sound effect like womp, 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 womp. I notice it every time. It's just this interesting little thing to me. I don't know what it means. I don't know why, but there it is.
Well, even in the 80s, and this is something that I always forget, it's our Black Christmas discussion, the very beginning when Billy climbs the lattice. Those cameras are not little. We think about it in the context of our camera's our phone. What is it? There was an award-winning movie like in a film festival that was shot completely on an iPhone.
Yeah, we've had several of those at this point.
Right.
But yeah.
So it's difficult to imagine the fact that cameras at that point, especially film canisters, a film canister is the size of a human fucking head. So the camera is huge. And I mean, to think even like a mid 90s camcorder is big.
Yeah.
So imagine taking one of those fucking over the shoulder camcorders, going up onto
you're having to stand on what the rafters
and shoot down,
and it's moving somehow. I think they had some kind of track up there.
They have
and
to
could
have,
move
right?
Because that's the only way that you do it like
Steadily,
cleanly and steady. And oh man, I think it was the producer in the commentary, because the commentary track on I think it's the 2009 Anchor Bay Blu-ray for The Evil Dead, is Sam Raimi, Bruce, and I believe it's Robert Tappert, the producer. he's telling a story of being up in those rafters shooting something, and he lost his balance and fell back, and there was a nail poking out that stabbed through his jeans into his leg, and he's hanging by that as everyone grabs him and lifts him up off of it.
Jesus.
Just in the middle. I'm telling you, everyone got hurt working on this film.
Yeah. Well, fucking Linda got her head cut off.
Well, no, that didn't actually happen.
What?
That was special effects.
That was really good. Forget all that fucking camera shit I talked about. The fact that they were able to cut somebody's head off, but they didn't.
They didn't.
That's crazy.
It was a dummy.
I like movies. We should do a show where we talk about movies, pirate movies.
Well, yeah, that'll be another. It'll be right after we do our episode on all 4 seasons of Righteous Gemstones.
Yes,
and then we'll just do pirate movies from then on.
Okay, that sounds like a deal.
Okay, I'll hold you to it.
You know, I'm going to take this opportunity to also pitch our other show. We were talking about, Derek and I were talking about maybe doing like a fan thing, like a Patreon. If this goes anywhere, we were talking about maybe doing something like that. And we were talking about what Patreon memberships would give you. And it was like, well, maybe we could do like, you know, like
bonus pods,
bonus content, right? Bonus episodes about different things, maybe TV stuff or like Universal Classic Monster movies, stuff like that. But I had the idea of doing a podcast where we talk about all of the Ernest movies. And we were talking about what would we call that? And I said we should call it The Importance of Being Earnest. And
it's a great title.
I think it is. It's such a good title that I really want to make that show now.
Eventually.
So
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Ash is losing it at this point. The clocks are spinning. The shutters are opening and closing on their own. After he does that walk across the front to the mirror, he reaches his hand out and the mirror becomes water.
Which is so, because that has to just be, they have the mirror, they take the frame off, they put the frame over a hole and they fill it with water. And
that means they had to build part of a set on its side.
Looks like the wall, exactly like the wall, because then they show the mirror regularly immediately after. And then they also have to get Bruce Campbell laying down, shot from the exact same distance without it looking like he's laying down.
Yep. And for the amount of money that they had and what they had available to them, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's an amazing effect that they then reuse in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
I feel like that was done differently, though.
So whenever Wanda has spoilers for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
We live in crazy times.
Wanda has broken into...
Camertage.
Thank you. And they've been fighting there. And Doctor Strange puts her in kind of a, mirror dimension?
Yes.
And she reaches her hand out at some point to one of the triangles of this mirror dimension. And she puts her hand through it and it becomes water. And I am almost certain they play the same water sound effect.
That would be great.
And it is just the most, like, if you know it reference.
And
but
like,
I love it.
Sam Raimi has already done superhero stuff. And none of those shots are too similar. They're not so similar to something from The Evil Dead that they're a reference.
Right.
Like, obviously, you've got similar shots. We just talked about the tentacle scene with Doc Ock in the hospital, but you have a director who is completely inventing, because those Spider-Man movies, I mean, when Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is seen in No Way Home, it then links those films into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they are then, they're not a shared universe, but they're a shared experience. Sam Raimi kind of invented the genre as we know it now.
Yeah.
Because those films are so ubiquitous with superhero movies, and they are nothing like The Evil Dead in any way. But Multiverse of Madness is exceptionally like it. The eyeball of that scene, that's what always makes me think of it, is the Wanda is then using the mirror universe to basically walk through reflections, which is an incredible scene. But there's a puddle on the ground that has a reflection, and an eyeball just opens up in the puddle. And I was like, man, that's fucking Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, there's several references, and we'll talk about them with our Evil Dead 2 discussion.
Yeah.
This is where Scotty is now for sure possessed. He pops back up. Cheryl has broken down the door, and they're fighting each other. He gouges out Scott's eyes.
He blasts, like I said, he blasts his sister, and her fucking cheek like explodes.
Yeah.
And it looks so good.
Yeah, it's an incredible shot.
It's gory as fuck, too. This
Yeah.
is where it's like super gory.
And
And up until this
every-
point, it's like you chop the head off and blood comes out, but it's like the pulling the thing out of his side and
That's
gouging
where-
his eyes out. It's like that's all gross. And then her face like bursting from the shot. It's like air escapes out of it because of the blast.
Yeah.
And it looks really good, but it's also I'd say this is where the movie gets like its goriest.
Yeah. The Necronomicon is knocked off of a desk or a something that was blocking the door, and it flies over and it lands just outside the fireplace. And that's when like Scotty starts reacting to that. Kind of slows down a bit. Smoke starts coming like out of him, and Ash notices that, and he why? And he notices, oh, the Necronomicon is catching on fire, so that has something to do with what's going on. So he's kind of figuring out the rules somehow.
Which is great because Ash is kind of a dummy. And so you have to spoon feed him the plot. And the fact that it's just those visual cues, it's like, yeah, even a dumbass could pick up on the fact that smoke is coming out of zombie because zombie book is on fire. It's like, yeah, that's great.
Right. So he tries to go over to it. Scotty grabs him by the leg, and so he falls on the ground. And we have this like extended scene of him just kind of like pawing at the book.
It's just boobery because
Yeah.
they're like just beating his ass with like a club. It is.
Yeah, she goes over and she picks up. Cheryl goes over to the fireplace and picks up a fireplace poker.
Again, we need to know in 5th edition, is that an improvised weapon or is that a club?
Let us know. And then she's like hitting him with that. Scotty is biting his ankle, like Ash's ankles. And in the fray, the necklace,
Magnifying glass.
the magnifying
necklace,
glass necklace has been knocked out on the floor as well. And when this is a weird thing, and it shows up in the other movies as well. We'll mention it again. But as Ash reaches for it, because he can't reach the Necronomicon itself that's on fire, he reaches forward and the necklace is on the ground, but the chain of the necklace is, for no explained reason,
in the shape of a skull.
is in the shape of a skull.
I noticed that today. I was like, is that a spooky skull? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. There's a shot just prior to that the camera pushes over Ash's body, the necklace, and then the Necronomicon shows it on fire. And it's not shaped like a skull. And then it just is.
Okay. Why
It's
is there
the-
a pipe in the cabin filled with blood?
Well, I don't know.
To get to the blood factory.
Yeah.
The pipe runs under the cabin to get to the blood factory that's down the way.
He uses the necklace then to kind of lasso the book
Right.
and pulls it out of the fire and then chunks it into the fire, like chucks it right in there and it's burning up.
Before we get to the climax, 2 questions. Number 1, why? Fight them off and grab the goddamn book with your hands. Ash, you idiot.
Yeah.
Second question, why are none of the Deadites interested in possessing Ash? Their goal is to possess everyone in the cabin, and I assume possess everyone. I don't know what else. The enemy goal has to exist. And in my mind, it's to possess people. And they never possess him ever.
No.
Apparently, it's as easy as shoving a camera through a window or stabbing somebody with a pencil.
Yeah, that's it. We don't get any, because it's not like a zombie. It's not
No.
like, oh, if you get bit or scratched or something.
Right.
This is,
Or even like Last of Us, where like there are spores that if you breathe in, it's like, no, if you
Nope.
get stabbed with a fucking number 2,
Linda, she gets stabbed.
I get it because the pencil has graphite, deadite. If you get stabbed with a pencil, you turn into a deadite. I understand that.
Maybe, you probably figured it out right there.
No, it is insane. Because it reminds me of the whitest kids you know bit. It's take that take that, you son of a bitch, because they're just hitting him over and over
as he lays on the ground
screaming, but not screaming in any. It's not like he's being like. It's not like they're breaking his bones, and he's just going like and they're just like and hitting him. It is that scene is so easy to just like, hey Ash, no one is really like holding you in place that much. One of them you've gouged the eyes out of. Kick him in the face, grab the goddamn book, and put it in the fire.
It's like they needed to build tension, but they didn't know how with one room and like a fight between 2 against 1. I'm giving you all the reasons why they could have easily done that.
Right.
But they didn't choose any of them.
Because like at this point, you've already done shit that's crazy. You've already done crazy horror stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that nobody's really done yet. Like gore that nobody's done yet. Maybe somebody nails him. Somebody got a nail in their butt while filming, I'm going to assume. But somebody got a nail in their butt cheek. Nail Ash to the ground or something. Do something gory. Make him suffer from something. Don't hit him with an improvised weapon or club and grab his leg.
That's all they have to do. But thankfully, he lassos that book.
Well, because you said it, they need to build tension and they've only got a room. But the problem is that the way they've chosen to build tension ruins all the tension.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
what are you guys doing? But yes, he grabs the book eventually. He lassos it and then frisbees it into the fireplace.
Which then causes both of them to just freeze in place.
And then some crazy shit happens.
Like the greatest bits of the whole movie are right here.
His hand like splitting apart and like turning into moon sand and then it's revealed to be bone underneath and it's like none of it's colored correctly. Like his inside meat is like all the same color and it's like a maroon. It's just so weird.
It's this beautiful blending.
Yeah, because that sounds negative to say it's weird. It's weird in the best way.
Yeah. It's this amazing blend of all these different techniques of stop motion, claymation, like they at one point, and you had pointed this out on one of the viewings we did this week of there's a shot of Scotty's head, and like one half of his head is going stop motion claymation, like melting. And then on the other half, they have this matted out spot where there's like blood bursting out from the skin and pouring down, but it's moving at regular water speed.
Yeah, it's the same kind of effect in Nightmare Before Christmas. Obviously, the whole thing is stop motion, but they're around the fountain, and the fountain is real water.
Yeah.
Because it's a blending of an element versus the stop motion. You can just match the speed of them together and put it to film. But that's a decade earlier.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And then they begin like exploding.
Well, they
pieces of
burn
them out.
And the fire is also real speed on top of stop motion footage. It's fantastic. It's amazing.
And their bodies are just like disintegrating down to nothing. And we finally get to a point where like they're both just kind of like, you think it's over.
And then
cream corn comes out of Scott's like sleeve.
Right. And then they fucking explode to giant like
demon
demon hands
that just come out of like their back and their chests.
And they just start fucking wiggling around.
Yeah.
I assume trying to one last swipe at Ash.
Probably.
They're terrible at it.
And I don't know. It's all of that apparently was done way after the fact. Like they shot everything. They had sent everybody else home. They had shot just the stuff with Bruce Campbell, stuff in the house, whatever. And then they later, like, whoever was doing those effects, like they were just like at his house in his basement, and they just kind of like, that's why everything is shot real close up. So you don't have to, it's just like, oh yeah, there's just wood walls or something behind it and the wood floor. And it's like, yeah, sure, we're in the cabin still.
Right.
You just fake it. And then,
you don't think about it because you're busy going, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Why is there cream corn?
and then between all of that, then it's just
applesauce.
reaction. It's just reaction shots of Bruce Campbell's face as every like explosion of blood just pounds him with more and more.
They had to have like They had to have like giant gushers with blood. That's what I imagine is like giant squeezy tubes and they just shoot at him. Poor Bruce Campbell. The things he's done for love.
That's the true message of this story. It's a love story. They call him Loverboy at some point. The sun comes up. You hear birds chirping outside, and the evil has been vanquished.
Yeah.
And so he moseys on outside, and we get our final shot, which kind of is it's very similar to our opening shot of the camera just kind of picks up out of the leaves and the dirt way, way back behind the cabin, and then zooms forward past the shack, bursts through the back door, bursts through the middle door of the house, bursts through the front door, and Ash spins around and it just crashes into his face. Basically, the camera, he just swallows the camera.
Yeah.
And that's your final shot of the movie. And then
they threw all that blood at him, so they didn't have anything else to throw at him, so they just hit him with a fucking camera.
And And I think the camera, that shot at the very end is done. They mount the camera on the front of a bike. And so that's how you get that like speed of them just like driving, just riding it through. And then I guess like they have people, because you see the doors like burst in half, like the front door cracks in two as it comes through. So I guess they just had people like pull it apart as it went.
That's great.
And cuts to credits.
Yeah.
It's got a goofy song that plays over the credits for some reason. Bruce Campbell, apparently he was the one who did the audio mixing in the movie.
Okay.
Because he was a producer on the film as well, and everybody had to do multiple jobs, and it was basically by the end of it, it was just Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, and I think Joel Cohen of the Coen brothers
really
is an assistant editor. He's listed as assistant editor in the credits, and they had met during the making of this, and the Coen brothers actually loved the idea. They were inspired by Raimi doing the whole Within the Woods, like make a short film and kind of use it as your calling card. And so they then made a short version of Blood Simple, and they shopped that around and then made it into a full film afterwards. So, it started the collaboration between the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and that whole group.
Yeah. It is in every way the craziest movie I've ever seen.
Yes.
Visually, performance-wise, plot-wise, the way it was made, hearing them talk about how awful it was to make, hearing you, because I didn't know any of the stuff about its distribution, so hearing all of that stuff, even the thing of like, oh yeah, I parked ambulances outside because I'm a fucking psycho. Like, everything about it is just, it's the craziest movie I've ever seen until. Thanks for tuning into the Third Channel Podcast. Please, if you have the time, rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps.
You can follow us on social media at Third Channel Podcast, and you can find me online at @DRosenberg.
You can also reach out to us at thirdchannelpodcast@gmail.com, where we check every message we swear. Third Channel is hosted by PJ Minette
and Derek Rosenberg. Theme song and audio engineering by Fly Guy Ty.
The logo designed by Bell DeVelco.
Episode artwork by Nathan Walkington.
Keep it tuned right here to the Third Channel for all things horror. And remember, don't touch that dial.
Egg salad and eggs.